right, and we are back. You're listening to the Exitology Unlock Your Profits, Unlock Your Potential show on the International Business Growth Network. And today I am joined by Dr. Craig West of Succession Plus, and he is not quite a founding member, but a very early adopter of the Certified Exit Planning Advisor designation, and actually received Exit Planner of the Year about 10 years ago, give or take, right?
Yeah, 2014. That's right.
Awesome. Well, now, Craig, I understand one of your innovations in the exit planning space. And folks, if you're just joining us, the exit planning space exists to really help business owners to unlock that value that's trapped in their business, but more importantly, change the outcome of their entire business journey and change it in a positive manner. And I'm going to let Craig take it away from here. But you actually developed a 21-step proven process for business owners to take them through this entire journey. Tell us, how did this develop? What is this? Just walk us through this whole thing.
Yeah, I think, I did the exit planning course back in 2011. And for those of you that haven't been to Australia, the flight from Chicago to Sydney takes roughly 20 hours altogether. There's there's a stop at LA on the way, and, there's a 15-hour flight from LA to Sydney. So it's a long trip.
That is a
You've
long
got plenty
trip.
of time. And I don't sleep all that well on planes. So I spent most of that time actually mapping out what I thought the key things were that needed to be included in an exit plan. So I literally wrote it on the plane. And at that point, I think I had 15 steps, not 21, and we've added to it since then. But the 21-step process really covers, the first thing I did was sort of work through the 5 stages. So what is now called the 5 stages of value, and Exit Planning Institute and so on teaches that. I sort of designed this model to say, well, business owners need to do a few things in the right order to make this happen.
Right.
From my accounting background, I also knew that baby boomers particularly love process. They don't love people turning up saying, okay, what are you up to? Let's work out what we're going to do today. What they love is someone turning up saying, well, you're up to step 7. Next is step 8. Here's what we need to do. It's all very structured. It's all very process driven, because they love that. And the reality is most of the business owners we were dealing with, I think you called them sort of blue collar businesses.
Yeah.
Those people aren't in business because they've got an MBA or they're geniuses at business. They're in business because they're really good at air conditioning or construction or, fixing diesel motors or whatever it might be that they're really good at.
Exactly.
And so that structure gives them the process they need to follow. So the 5 stages really started with working through what does it need to look like from a business owner's point of view to get them ready to exit. And so the first stage is called identify value, because I realized very quickly most business owners had no idea what their business was worth, no idea why it was worth that. I would give them a valuation that said your business is worth 5, and they would straight away say, well, why not 3 or why not 7? What makes it worth 5?
Right.
And yeah, it's partly about the numbers, but the other thing that I understood very quickly was in this particular market, it's only 50% about the numbers. The other 50% is about the business, the operations, the risk, the management, the key person dependency, all those other factors that go into that formula. And so the identify value stage, really the first 3 steps, is really just about getting very clear with the business owner on 3 key things. Firstly, what do they want to achieve? And interestingly, most business owners haven't got that sorted either. So do they want to sell it? Do they want to keep it in the family? Do they need $5 million when they sell it to retire, or do they need 10? Or do they want to set it up so their kids can run it for the next 20 years or whatever it might be? We need to get really clear on what that is.
Right.
And then step 2 and 3 is around fact find, which is, go and get all the information that we need on the business. Make sure we know everything we need to know about the industry, the economy, the market, the way the business is run, the risks, everything else. And then step 3 is actually what we call business insights. And, we talked about the book. It all begins with insights. And the reason it all begins with insights is my very strong view is you can't do anything else in exit planning unless you know exactly what you've got. What are you starting with today? What does it look like? What's it worth? What could it be worth? What can we do with it? So that first stage is really the basics of just getting the foundation right so the owner understands exactly where we're at.
Well, what I really like about all that, and this is why we were so excited to have you on this on this show, is we always invite people to begin with the end in mind, right? And
Absolutely.
and that's and the way that you asked it was, well, what do you want to achieve? And it's it's an amazingly loaded question, actually, because a lot of times what we found is that nobody has given these business owners both space and permission to even dream big and say that you do have possibilities.
Correct.
And so there's that, right? And you can probably speak to this in a way that I can't, but baby boomer business owners who have these businesses, yes, they love the process, and yes, they continue to love, how does this work? But for a lot of them, we're finding the exit sort of snuck up on them. And so this type of work becomes very important now to identify where you are and where you want to go, because most of the time between those two things, there's a gap. Fair enough.
Absolutely. And you're right. Sometimes it's snuck up on them. Even more interestingly, with businesses that have got more than one owner, and that might just be mum and dad.
Right.
But I have literally had an example where I sat down with mum and dad in my boardroom and said, okay, what do you want to get out of this business? And within 5 minutes, mum says, I want to keep it so my 2 sons can run it and have it forever. And dad says, I'm sick of it. I want to sell it in the next 2 years. Now, I simply say, oh, that's great, but you can't do both. Like, somebody has to work out those two things aren't compatible.
Right.
And that's even more difficult if you've got 4 completely separate shareholders with 4 families and 4 different agendas. And that's the reason we say, begin with the end in mind and start with what you know. What
Right.
do you want to actually achieve? Because I can help you with either of those 2 options, but I can't do both. You have to tell me which one we're doing, because they're very different outcomes.
So when we're thinking of succession, we're thinking this 21-step process that you developed and you've frankly refined over the last 10 years, 10 plus years. If you don't know where you're going, then it's pretty pointless to put a ladder to get you to somewhere, because you're going to end up in the wrong place. Is that a fair way to say that?
Absolutely. And the reality is most business owners don't know what they've got. They don't know what it's worth, and they don't know what they could do with it. Sometimes some of the exit options that people come up with are just not viable.
Right.
They're just not possible given the structure or the industry or the whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is also a reality check to say, well, actually, what you think's worth $15 million is actually worth 6.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, as of today, even though it might be worth 6, it's not saleable. No one will buy it today because of X,
Mm-hmm.
Y, and Z. Therefore, let's work out what you need to do to get it to that point.
Yeah.
And then we can map out what the other 18 steps out of 21 need to look like.
Gotcha. So if I'm hearing you, so if we're sitting, in a virtual boardroom here and somebody's listening to this and saying, oh no, I don't even know what my business is worth, and I'm kind of not sure where I want to go with this. What, if they were sitting in your boardroom, how would you lead them through that conversation, and where would you invite them to start thinking?
And look, one of the things that I'm really proud of is, like, we've worked with more than 800 owners in the last sort of 15 years. Every single one of them has done a business insights report. It is not negotiable with me, and neither is it with my advisors. So every single person starts with that business insights report, because otherwise we just do not know what to tell them, how to help them. So that's why, the book, It All Begins with Insights, that's why it's called It All Begins with Insights. It's not flexible.
Yeah.
You've got a 21-step process. There's not much point starting at step 5. You've got to start at step 1 and work through.
And I know you have earned your doctorate, and I'm not making light of that, but you are a business doctor in the sense that we need to diagnose before we can prescribe. This is a true story. Yes?
Absolutely. You've got to really get the facts and figures together. And unfortunately,
Totally.
as I said, most business owners don't have that information.
Right.
They're not familiar with it. They're not even sure what it all means. So getting that right is really important.
Yeah. And then do you find because I'm in total agreement with you, we make it a non-negotiable to know where you are also, right? We want to know how what does your business actually look like to outside capital, is the way that we put it. But it's that's what we need to know, because once we know that, right, you can't prescribe before you diagnose. But then as once you've diagnosed or put a stake in the ground, right, and there's something you can measure, then you can improve it. And so how do you find, let's say if you had a room full of 10 people who went through the Business Insights report, what is the percentage who kind of freaks out and walks away versus the people who, go through the process and end up going along with advisor to the promised land?
Yeah, look, there are a few people that freak out when they get the report, either because they thought their business was worth 15 and now I've told them it's worth 6.
Right.
Or the other way around. Or I've told them that, no, there's no way you can IPO this business. It's just not big enough. Or no, you can't pass it on to your children as it is at the moment because it's far too risky. So sometimes it's a confronting conversation. It's a little bit about, Justin Goodbread talks about the ugly baby. Sometimes
Right.
it's a bit of that as well, to say,
Right.
you know what, this is not as good as you thought it was.
Right.
And there are some issues here that need to be resolved before you can go further. But you do also get business owners that are driven and motivated and doers and will just say, right, as soon as they get the report, they ask two questions. How? And that's the 21 steps. So how do I get from here to an exit? You've just told me everything about it.
Yep.
And secondly, they want to know, what does it look like? What do I have to do as the owner? How much time do you need? I'm already working really hard. What's it going to cost me? All those questions come up, and they're more doing questions around, okay,
Yeah.
I agree with you. I understand you know what you're talking about. How do I go ahead and make it happen?
And so I think for the listeners out there, obviously you want to be in that second group, right? Like, take the medicine. Wherever you are is where you are, right? No judgment. It's just where you are. But how do you get it done? And I think those are important questions. And would I be correct in assuming that when they're working with an advisor, then, you're not going to be putting in more time. You're going to be working smarter and more efficiently. You're already putting in all of the time. So it's not like that time exists anyways, right? Like,
correct.
Maybe we can
Look,
speak
a good
to
advisor
yeah.
with using the right tools should be able to make this a lot easier than it would be without it.
Right.
And so exit planning advisors are specifically trained to make that happen effectively for you. As you said in the introduction, it's also good business sense. So some of the things that we're working on the way through, just simplify or speed up or automate a process that's already there and probably ends up saving you time. What I also think is important is this sort of stuff, most business owners really enjoy working on it.
Right.
Because it's really quite interesting. It can be challenging, don't get me wrong, but it's also interesting and it's focusing on building the value of their business, which who doesn't like doing that?
Exactly. So I love that you brought it all the way back home there. So really the idea here is, if you go through this process, don't freak out, take the medicine, just accept that first step, but then realize that the rest of it is, as you change your relationship to the business, it's going to be gamified and it's going to be a lot of fun. So folks, you can get a copy of Craig's book and on our show notes on exitology.com. And also, Craig, what's the best website for you?
The best website to get that information is probably the software website, which is capitalize.com. So capitalize without an E.com.
Beautiful. And we'll talk a little bit more about that product here in a few minutes. Folks, you're listening to the Exitology Unlock Your Profits, Unlock Your Potential show on the International Business Growth Radio Network.